tweet is out.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully, you can hear us and see us. We'll be starting momentarily for the last episode of the year. Hooray! Oh, you did it even on Threads. Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
I need to get a haircut. Look at this monstrosity on my head. Ridiculous.
Yeah, I got mine yesterday.
It's cold
It was cool
outside
because
now.
so yeah, when I went, she's like, I was usually doing a skin fade, and like, yeah, I was way too cold with a skin fade. I was like walking my dog, and it was just like this cold air blowing back and down back of my neck. I was like,
Yeah.
damn, I feel bad for bald people. I get why they're always wearing hats now. Like, that hair works.
Yeah. All right, I'm
So I
ready
was
to
like,
go when
oh,
you
we'll
are.
just do a. Yep. Let's see. What's up? Quarter. All right, I'm now recording.
I'm now recording.
3, 2, 1, clap. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 336 for December 15th, 2023. Hey everyone, Gina Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting Windows Central podcast, the last one ever for 2023. I think I've done that joke 5
Every
years in a
year.
row now.
Yeah.
Someday, though, I'm going to say that, and it's going to be true.
That's really sad to think about.
Yeah. Or actually, I might not be able to do it myself. I might have to do it via AI because maybe I died suddenly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We've got your voice on lock for the AI, don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. So you could just like easily just make a new clip. Anyway, on to brighter news. This week's show will be talking about Intel's new Core Ultra processors. These are also known as Meteor Lake. So we've talked about them previously, but they are now official. We got official SKUs, that is all the different version numbers. There have even been a few laptops announced, and we'll talk about that, what it means, and what the challenges are here for Intel. Zach will do a 2023 recap as well, and then we'll fade into a 2024 expectations for PC and Windows. As probably no surprises if you listen to the podcast pretty regularly what we're going to say, because next year I think is going to be one of the most important years for PC, at least in terms of technology and abilities. Whether or not that translates into economic rewards, that is, people buying new hardware, remains to be seen. But the economy does seem to be recovering enough, so maybe something will happen there. And then thing of the week, if we can think of something. I guess should I do jury duty? That was always funny. Okay, well, Zach, how are you doing on this fine Friday before the Xmas?
I'm not too bad. I'm very excited for the break. I think we've worked very hard this year, and I just want to relax for a week.
Yes, yes. Oh, by the way, you never got back to me on that request last night.
Oh, no, I can't do it.
Okay, I guess I'll email them shortly after this. Yeah, it's been a long few weeks, that's for sure. I'm definitely looking forward to the break. Although, as we were discussing on a previous meeting, none of us are really going kind of on break. I mean, we are. We're going to take it a little bit easy because there won't be as much news happening. But Windows Central will still be posting news or editorial stuff throughout the holiday as it is important, or as it comes up, I should say. Because obviously there's usually not a lot of news, but we're not going to go completely off the grid either. Despite our company has a policy which basically says we shut down from, was it December 24th through January 1st, technically the 2nd if you're in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
That's a weird policy to have, in my opinion, but those UK people. Anyway, I suppose we should get into the big news this week, which is, of course, going to be the Intel Core Ultra Meteor Lake stuff. So I've already seen these processors, at least in the new laptops. There were a few new laptops announced this week. Not really too amazing. It was a couple of Lenovo's, including the ThinkPad, right? The X1 Carbon and Yoga. They're quintessential ThinkPads, right? The most premium ones and the most well-known. So Those are no surprise going to the Core Ultras. So those should be coming out soon. A lot of the stuff from Acer and Asus and stuff like that, it's kind of trickling out, and they'll be actually hitting store shelves literally like in days, if not available now. I will say though, if you're underwhelmed by what's out there or what's been announced, CES is coming out at the in January, which means of course I got to fly to Vegas uh, for 2.5 days. I think I'll be out there. I like to keep things short, but there I can already tell you there's going to be a lot of new laptops announced from all the big companies. And there's some really cool stuff that is coming there. Some of it, like when it's announced, you'll be like, yeah, okay, I could. It won't be a surprise. It'll be a surprise, but it won't be like logically it'll make sense. Uh, but anyways, these processors, there are, two types. There's going to be the H series and then there's the U series. So that's not dissimilar from what we've had previously with the Core I series. So they're dropping the I bit here because did it ever make sense? It didn't. But they're trying to simplify things a bit. So these are called like Core Ultra 9, Core Ultra 7, Core Ultra 5s, right? And then you have H and U designations for those. So instead of a Core i7, you're going to have a Core Ultra 7. It's still not short, but at least it's kind of, I don't know, a little bit more to the point, makes sense. Below that, you will have some numbers and letters, right? So you could have the 185H, the 165H, the 155H, 135H, or you could have 165U, 164U, 155U. So there is still some confusion here with the numbers. And I know, I've mentioned this before on the podcast, Intel's the reason Intel does this, it's not like they're like audiences are going to love that we call it the 155U. Like that's not why they're doing it. They do it because OEMs, the PC makers, basically kind of demand this flexibility with processors because these different SKUs come in at different price points, which allows those companies then to hit different price points for laptops that they want to design and market. It also hits different performance metrics, which again determines things like your thermals, right? If you're going to make a really high, if you only had like two core i7, a core i5, and maybe an i3, right? Or sorry, not even core. Sorry, core Ultra 7, Ultra 5. Like if you only had those, um, you would be pretty restricted on stuff you can do with them. So that's why there's all these kind of different options out there. Some have different graphics, some have different power needs and all that kind of stuff. So we've covered the design on these chips previously, but just to recap, this is what Intel calls the biggest architectural shift in 40 years for them. So whereas they went to P and E cores for 12th and 13th gen, this goes a little bit further by introducing two more cores that are low energy LE cores that sit on the main tile, and that's the other change here is it's a tile design. So there are going to be, I believe, 5 tiles, each one dedicated to a different function on the chip. And that's kind of the magic here when it comes to efficiency. There's two efficiency stories here, right? One is that they're going to a smaller node, and they're going to go even smaller than this. Their goal was 5 nodes in 4 years. That's they're saying. They repeat it over and over internally, but that's what they're doing. They're dropping down the nodes as quickly as possible, and they've been on schedule. They've been doing this like every year. They've been kind of hitting a new milestone. So they're doing that. So you're going to get more. The smaller the chip gets, the more energy efficient it gets. That's why there's always people talking about nanometers and all that kind of stuff. So you get efficiency there. The other efficiency thing is because these tiles, there's a GPU tile, there's a main silicon tile, there's like an AI tile. Because you have all these different tiles, when they're not being used, they power off. And that's kind of really critical here. So that's going to allow this dynamic switching of these chips on and off. And we're talking extremely fast switching. Obviously, you're not going to feel it, right? But allows the chip then to save more power. I don't know how much. We're hearing 20% maybe. It's hard to quantify. Reviewing these processors is different than reviewing a desktop processor. At least a desktop processor, you throw it into the motherboard and unless you're going to overclock it, it's a pretty standard story when it comes to benchmarking. They're all going to kind of perform the same. It just depends on things like your SSD and your RAM, obviously. But in terms of raw performance, you know what you're getting. When it comes to laptops, though, man, it varies because they can control the power wattage of the TDP of it, the chip, right? You have the ultra performance, you have economic or efficiency performance, I should say. Then you have battery life, and battery life is like really, really it's so dependent on the display for one. If you're using a 4K display versus full HD, you can get radically different battery life. You may have, you know, the X1 Carbon. Let's take that one, right? So you have the Gen 8 with the 13th gen in there. Now you have the Gen 9 with this Core Ultra, right? Comparing those battery lives, yeah, we'll look at those numbers up. But like, did they increase the battery size with the new Gen 9? Because technically the SoC for this is smaller than the previous one. They could have done that. And then if you factor that, say they change the battery size, how do you directly compare then the battery life, right? That requires a little bit more math in terms of breaking things down. So it'll be a little bit tricky. I will say they also announced the fourth gen, basically, of Intel Evo, their program for standards on these laptops. Intel Evo is basically the answer when people rave about Apple's control of hardware and software, the whole stack, right? Apple can do that because they don't make processors for anyone else, just themselves. So they can determine the hardware and what it needs, and they build the OS for it as well. Evo is an effort where they work with Microsoft directly. So all this stuff with all these cores, the P&E cores and how it handles the scheduler, was worked with Microsoft, helped them with the software so that Windows takes advantage of all this stuff. But then they also, with OEMs, they set these standards for the chips. So, for instance, I believe a laptop with a full HD display needs to get at least 10 hours of real world battery life, right? So that's like one of the new standards. They also need to have Thunderbolt 4. They need to have Wi-Fi 6E. They need to have thin bezels. Believe it or not, that's a requirement. They need to have instant on. So when you open that lid, the display is on within like a second and a half or something. You need to have fast charge to get like the battery to 50% in like 30 minutes or some number. So when a laptop meets all that stuff, including at least 8 gigs of RAM, at least 256 gigs of PCIe SSD storage, when a laptop meets all those requirements, they get a sticker. And usually those OEMs are building that laptop as co-engineered with Intel. So Intel's actually working with them specifically on thermals and battery life. And that's why you get that sticker. That's why you also typically find these more premium laptops because they're a little bit more expensive because of all the required hardware in them. But the Evo stuff it's been really good. I think it's been nice. It's even expanding now to accessories, and it even expanded now to environmental stuff. So now there is environmental requirements too for some of the metals and stuff being used by these companies. I can tell you, like Dell, actually they all are, all Dell, HP, Lenovo, they're all leaning heavily into environmental concerns for laptops, recyclable materials, basically. And I was talking to them about that, and it's like, it's still not completely economically advantageous for them to be doing this, but they know long term it's going to pay off. In other words, it will do. So it's still expensive to convert metals, recycle steel, for instance, for the frames, or glass, or, certain plastics that they use. But as they do it more and more companies adopt it, just like anything else, it scales up, the pricing comes down, and longer term, not only is it better for the environment, it's also going to be more efficient for the laptop makers. So that's all part of this. You're also going to get a speed bump, of course. I should say, though, there's also, to confuse things even more, there will be Intel 14th gen chips too.
Wait, what are these?
Yeah, so they're not anything. They're Core Ultra. I would say you could think that's why they're called Core Ultras.
Okay.
You can think of them as Gen 1. In fact, if we go through those numbers again, right? 165, 164, 155U, it's one, right?
Yeah.
I imagine Intel Core 7 265U will be next year, right?
Okay.
So these are kind of a Gen 1 things. But there's also 14th gen, just like for desktop, there was a mild refresh for 14th gen. They're going to do that for laptops too. You'll find these mostly in gaming laptops, though, like the HX and the H processors. I don't know about any other ones. They haven't really talked about them yet. So, but and I think these might be a little bit more expensive. And because the other big thing with these chips, it's the elephant in the room, is the NPU, right? These ship with
Mm.
pretty much, I think they all do. That's why they're called ultras, but they all ship with a dedicated processor, basically.
Oh,
Um,
does that mean 14th gen might not include the NPU?
Correct, 100%.
Okay, interesting. Okay. Yeah, that was
Yeah, and
confusing
that
to
might
me.
be
I just assumed this was all under the 14th gen umbrella and there would be different SKUs of that, but I guess not.
nope, they're definitely not 14th gen. 14th gen is a Skylake refresh. I think it was Skylake.
Yeah.
I always forget the names on them, but it's a refresh. Uh, and they kind of make sense, right? At least I've used for some devices, like some gaming laptops right now, probably won't need an NPU for AI. Um, and I
Yeah.
think they focus a little bit more on raw performance. That's not saying that they won't need it at some points. I think they will, but I think this is kind of a phase in, and Intel wants to give OEMs again some choice and options, both on pricing and different configurations. I think also because with the 14th gen, you don't really need to redesign the laptop.
Mm.
It's literally going to be a drop in, a switch with the 13th gen, right? It's the same chip, all the same requirements. It's basically just slightly faster. So for devices that they don't want to redesign, but merely refresh the internal hardwares, maybe add, speed up the RAM, speed up the SSD, a little bit better components, it saves them money there. Everything that's going to come out with a Core Ultra has to have been redesigned somehow, not externally, although you'll see that too, of course. But I mean the entire board
Right.
is new, right? Because it's a complete new architecture,
Yeah.
design, all that. You can't just drop these chips in, so that becomes much more expensive. So I think
So,
that's the reason why. Yeah.
which of these chips are the chips Intel are positioning as the competitors for Qualcomm's Snapdragon X Elites? I assume it's the Ultra stuff, right?
Yes.
And
Oh yeah.
how
Yeah.
are they as competitors? Are they up there? Is it still sort of Qualcomm taking the lead here?
We don't know. I can tell you, Intel will be doing a lot more benchmarking of these chips at CES, so we'll get some more information. Of course, Qualcomm stuff isn't out until what you're hearing, maybe May,
Yeah.
maybe June,
Yeah.
probably June at least, but May as early. So my hunch is Intel is going to still win out on performance, especially single core. I think they always do. So I think they'll still be faster. Not only that, don't forget Qualcomm basically has one chip, although it has a different. You can scale it
Yeah.
differently depending
That's
on the
right.
device. But technically, they don't have a U series, an H series, and then within those series, a 3, a 5, and a 7.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so Intel has a lot more flexibility here, and plus, Intel has its HX processor. For those who don't know, the H series is a straight up mobile processor. HX is literally a desktop processor, slightly modified and brought down to laptops. But it's the same. Those are the big heavy hitters that you find in some options of workstations in gaming laptops. But those are extremely powerful chips. Qualcomm can't compete anything close to that. Will these compete with the U series? So again, U is usually thought of as like ultrabook, ultra thin, all that kind of stuff, and H is thought of for workstations and gaming devices. Will Qualcomm compete with Intel there on some performance stuff? Yeah, I think they'll be close. Like I don't think it'll be miles. It won't be like what it is now, right?
Yeah.
Like right now, it's just like night and day in terms of performance between a Snapdragon 8CX and a Intel,
Mm-hmm.
13 Gen. I think these will be closer. You may even see, on core counts and performance there, because don't forget, Qualcomm has 12 cores, and let's see what the cores on these. The H series has 14 to 16 cores, and then the U series has 12 cores. So they're going to compete pretty close on cores. So their multi-core performance may be kind of similar, um, but I think Qualcomm's still going to win out on efficiency.
Yeah, I was going to say, surely
It
their battery life will be better overall.
has to be. It has to
Yeah.
be. Otherwise, then because the whole thing with ARM is it's efficient.
Yeah.
If Intel just comes out the gate with an x86 processor that's as efficient or more, um, then it's like, wait, why are we talking about ARM? Like, what's even the point of it? So I expect that to be
I th-
still a winner.
I think
And a
the NPU will
yeah, go
also
ahead.
be better on Qualcomm, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, 100%. So Qualcomm's been building NPUs for over a decade
Right.
because they've been using them in their smartphones. Intel is basically still new to it. By the way, Zach, I got an answer for you as to why. Remember, we're talking about Microsoft Studio Effects being shipped in some like Lenovo devices and then it
Yeah.
was turned off?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know why. Apparently, a lot of these devices had like a secret kind of NPU on them, but it was built onto the SSD.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I never heard of this. And it didn't work great, or it had some performance issues and all this kind of stuff. And so that's why it was turned off. And I think Microsoft didn't want so that's why Microsoft Studio Effects, with the controversy was this, for those who missed it, Microsoft Studio Effects are like available on Surface devices right
Mm-hmm.
now. And then they kind of showed up on some third party or other OEM laptops, but then they kind of like disappeared. I think Lenovo was one example. Uh, but they're coming back. So all these new laptops that are going to come out will have Microsoft Studio Effects,
Right.
but it's because they're all going to have proper NPUs at this point.
Oh,
So
good.
that's
So,
kind of
so
the
the
thing. So
HCX laptops, their NPUs are fake. Is that what we're hearing?
yeah, or yeah, there's just something
the,
about them.
the
But
implementation's odd, I guess. On the SSD, that is strange. Yeah.
yeah, there's something with that. I don't know. That's what I was told
Weird.
with someone
At least we have
who,
an answer.
but they, yeah. But yeah, Qualcomm will definitely, I think, beat them out on the NPU chip. Uh,
Yeah.
so that's going to be kind of fun to watch. And then there's graphics. So there's a new Arc graphics on these chips, which is kind of cool. So these aren't Iris Xe anymore. This is Arc, and it's literally quoting Intel 2 times the performance of Iris Xe, which means at full HD you should be able to play some like even like racing video games like Forza at 60 frames per second.
Oh,
That's
nice.
the claim. I've seen it actually done, but I need to obviously try it myself kind of thing. But yeah, these GPUs for once are going to not only are they going to be much more performant, I think they can perform up to around a 3050. Don't completely quote me on that one. We got to get those numbers, but I thought I remember hearing that. The other big change is these are actually going to have GPU drivers, which we really haven't seen up until this point. And what I mean here, like technically there is kind of like a driver system for updating stuff through Intel, but like I mean this is going to be like how Nvidia updates its GPUs, where like every couple weeks you get a new GPU, a new driver that's optimized for the new video games and all that kind of stuff. Intel is going down that path. And if you already have a separate Arc GPU in your desktop PC, you know what I mean here. In fact, that was a big issue with Arc was out the gate, its drivers were bad. And Intel knew that, but they released something like 30 driver updates within the first year, which was like unparalleled. Like no one's ever done that much before. And it's really caught up. Now, like the Arc GPUs are actually pretty good. And they're going to continue hammering at it. But they're going to take everything that they learned from there, including those optimized drivers, all now apply to these laptops. So out the gate, these laptops won't have those same issues. They're going to be comparable to what you can kind of already get with the separate desktop GPUs. So that's kind of all the big news there. Like I said, the NPU stuff is huge because, as I talked about endlessly on the previous podcast, uh, when all these laptops ship with NPUs, it means software companies can target that NPU for using for software, and we'll see more software come out with AI stuff built in. I can also tell you a lot of these OEMs are partnering up with pretty some well-known companies for software and putting AI stuff into it. Um, some of it will be familiar, like generative image stuff as well as, chatting and stuff, but some of it will be novel. And you'll see a lot more creative use of this technology going further. Now, if your laptop doesn't have an NPU, doesn't mean you can't use this stuff. As I said, like eventually the new version of Windows is going to be able to detect your hardware and then choose between the GPU, the CPU, and if you have an NPU, which is the best one for that moment to be using for that task. So GPUs can, if you have a gaming laptop, your GPU should be able to handle this stuff. If you don't have a NVIDIA GPU or something, your CPU might jump in and do it. But the NPU, the benefit of them is they're way faster than a GPU or a CPU in terms of performance, and they're like a third, I think 30% more efficient too. So they save battery life and as well as being faster. So that's why they're being put in all these devices. I know some people are going to say this is all hype and all that, and I can tell you none of these companies think it's hype.
Right.
They're literally calling this stuff AI PCs, and for consumers, I think it's still going to you're going to see that skepticism still. I can tell you though, for enterprise, they're going hardcore into this because it's about solving productivity issues,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of companies are demanding all this stuff to make workers work better. So I don't know, Zach, what do you think about all this stuff?
I think it's super exciting. You're totally right about the whole AI PC wave. It is coming. And yeah, I think you're right. I think like consumers will probably be less interested in it, but I think for consumers, it's the creative aspect of AI that's more appealing than
Yeah,
the productivity side. Things like, background blur, which is stuff we already got in Windows, but background blur, all this super resolution stuff that I wrote about a couple of weeks back, where like, games will be upscaled on hardware of NPU and stuff, NPUs. Um, we're going to see also like the ability to hold on a photo and like cut out like a person in that photo to paste elsewhere. Basic things like
yeah.
that are
Dude, I use
coming.
it all the time now in Paint. I
Yeah.
freaking love that
Yeah,
feature.
yeah, exactly. Like that's gonna become normal, and consumers, I think, are gonna like that. Like, we're also already seeing things like the ability to like zoom out in of photos using AI, where the AI will fill in the surrounding area to make
The
the
background.
photo zoomed
Yeah,
out.
it's a
Like
reverse crop almost.
reverse, yeah, exactly. That sort of stuff, I think, is what consumers will be way more interested in versus, oh, the OS can bring me a work file quicker. Great. It's like, yeah, sure,
Right.
that's great
Yeah.
in your work day to day, but that's not something to be excited about. Versus this other stuff like AI and video, AI and photos. That I think is going to be a lot more interesting for people as we head into 2024 and beyond. And yeah, you're right. All the OEMs are on board. Clearly, Microsoft is on board because they're building a lot of this into Windows natively. Like 2024 is the year of AI PCs, and it's not just from OEMs. It's top down from the OS all the way down to the driver level. Everyone
Yeah.
is involved. Microsoft is working with all the OEMs. All the OEMs are working with Microsoft. I wouldn't even be surprised if all the OEMs are working with each other to execute on this goal. Qualcomm's there, Intel's there. Who knows what AMD's doing? They're probably there as well.
They have an NPU, but yeah, they're not leading in this space. I
No,
can absolutely tell you
are they
that.
leading in any
Intel is
space?
like, yeah. I know Intel's like working with partners on optimizing software. I tell you, the OEMs are definitely doing it themselves, whether it's creating
Mhm.
their own software or it's partnering up with sort of well-known companies that are already making their own software. So, the thing with OEMs, they're going to do what they always do, which is try to value add to the laptop. In other words, if you're going to get like a Dell laptop, they want sort of some kind of special experience on there that no one else does. They all do this. I think HP has a really great suite of software that they already ship with. It was funny too because I was hearing one of the I won't one of our sister sites, we in a meeting, they were like, yeah, and HP showed off this new ability where if you're using the webcam and someone is like looking over your shoulder, looking at your
And shuts
screen,
off.
it'll let you know. And I was like, that's not new. They've
No.
been doing that for about 2 years now. What's new is that function was previously dependent upon your CPU, and so it would slow down your system and degrade performance. Now it'll hop to the NPU, and you won't get that degradation. So you're going to see a lot of improvements around video cameras, audio, and all that kind of stuff as well. But yeah, you're right. The generative and that stuff you were mentioning with the photos and all that stuff, that's coming to phones. So everything Qualcomm announced with its PC processor there, the X Elite, is coming to their phones next year. So they're putting this chip in everything, by the way. They're going to put it into cars and AR glasses. They're going to put it to phones. And you're going to get this NPU ability, which they've already showed. Like when we were in Hawaii, they showed us phones with the processor in there, and they showed like how fast it could do generative image creation, and it's like lightning fast, right? And you can do this stuff locally, right? So this is the 7 billion parameter stuff. In fact, I was trying to explain this to Jez Corden yesterday. The 7 billion parameter thing, if you type in like large language model, is sort of this standard for large language models, where when you have 7 billion parameters, it can like effectively work offline.
Mhm.
And so you could have a general one, uh, you know, so like you could be offline and ask it to, give me a lemon meringue recipe and it'll generate one using offline doing that, right? Now, if you needed like tell me about the baseball game last night, yeah, then it needs to go to the web and fetch that information. But that's kind of the benefit there is like you can do a lot of this stuff local.
Yeah,
And the other thing is,
that's going to be the hybrid AI stuff, right? That Microsoft has been talking
yeah,
about, where the AI will only reach out to the cloud if it needs up to date information.
exactly.
Otherwise, a lot of the basic stuff can just be done on device because it's cheaper for Microsoft and their server farms, and it's quicker for the end
Yes,
user as
yes.
well.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it saves power
Hmm.
because you don't have to, yeah, it's faster. Because right now the issue is, you're using Bing Chat or, Copilot, whatever. When you type it in, you wait there for a few seconds. And yeah, they could make it go faster, but then they're going to have to use way more power for
Right.
the GPUs and the farms. This, you're going to get like, if 80% of it can be done on your phone locally, it's going to go lightning fast. And then, yeah, maybe it'll hit the web to pull in relevant information if you're asking about something that is new, right? Like you can use, Chat GPT basically works offline right now. You have a one-to-one connection to their server, but Chat GPT doesn't go out onto the web and crawl and get other information, which is what Microsoft did with its Copilot, right? So that's kind
Mm.
of the difference there. But this is what I was talking about last week in the podcast too, because companies then could take these 7 billion parameter large language models and make them specialized. So you can have one just on like um, second language learning. You can have one on coding and programming, right? That's dedicated just to computer programming, and it will just know that. One I mentioned last week was for paralegals and lawyers, where it just knows how to talk in legalese and cite documents and write a document for a lawyer that adheres to their standards and style of writing. So that's where all this stuff becomes very useful for a lot of companies. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's gonna be a big deal. It's gonna be kind of fun to watch. Like I said, I think we'll still hear on this podcast from our audience, like, "Oh, I don't see the big deal, and like I got it, and I don't see anything on my computer I use. But I can tell you, this will be an enterprise primarily driven thing, and it'll trickle down to people who are using their laptops for productivity purposes. But yeah, if you're just using it for gaming, um,
Right.
is it gaming or porn? Uh, yeah, you might not see, but even for gaming, I don't see why you wouldn't want an NPU because you could
Yeah.
be playing a video game while streaming using your webcam, which is now NPU powered, so it looks good, it's blurred out, and all that kind of stuff. Um, and it could do other things like balance out your audio. So, like, why wouldn't you want that? Because you don't want to do that and then tax your GPU while you're gaming. That
Yeah.
makes no sense,
I I think a better way to think of the NPU is think of it as an additional CPU for background processes. Things that you wouldn't
Yeah,
that you want to run in the background but don't want hogging CPU, right? Um, that's how I look at it anyway. Like the idea that this webcam would be able to do all the blurring stuff in the background on a different CPU, so that my main CPU can handle doing the live stream and stuff. That is what I
yeah.
prefer. This idea that AI is working constantly in the background to enhance search and bring me files and stuff. I don't want that working on the main CPU. I want that one running off an additional CPU that doesn't affect my main system performance. That's how I look at NPUs. I look at them as just an additional CPU for background tasks. And a lot of those background tasks right now appear to be AI focused.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Although even that's funny too, because the Intel chip itself is architected in a way to help with what you're talking about just for regular CPU processes, right?
Right.
That's the point of P and E cores.
Yeah.
E cores are the ones that will also run in the background. And now you have the low energy E cores, which are two, which handle really, I forgot what they called it. They had a funny joke when I was talking to Intel about it. It was like act. I don't know. Everybody knows what I'm going to talk about. Is when you hit Control Alt Delete and bring up Task Manager, and you're literally doing nothing except staring at Task Manager, and then you can still see your computer is using between like 4 and 8%. And it's
Yeah.
bouncing around, even though you're technically not doing anything. I forgot what they called those tests. They had a funny name for it because it's supposed to be like it should be kind of a 0%,
Hmm.
but it's not because of these background processes that need to occur. These new low energy cores are handling that stuff. While
Right.
then your other E cores can handle apps you're running in the background. And then your P cores handle what you're actually doing at that moment, whether whatever window is front and center. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a pretty cool system. So someone asked if will Qualcomm be able to surpass competition performance-wise anytime soon? They sunk a ton of our money to R&D. Um, yes, I think it's quite possible. It depends how you look at this, because I think ultimately you could probably beat ARM. I mean, for instance, Intel already beats Apple in
Yeah, right.
performance. Like, it's not even a question. Like, the question comes down to power per watt, you
Hmm.
know? So I think Intel will always be able to beat them in performance because they could just add more cores, which is kind of what they've been doing, um, just cranking up the gigahertz. But the question is, like, at what cost, right? Uh, do you have loud fans? Do you even have fans? How hot is the device getting? What's the battery life, right? And I think that's going to be the balance here. So I think that's the measure, the power per watt is going to be the real key here. And I think Qualcomm will, I think already the X Elite chips are going to be fast enough for most people. Not for gaming laptops, but for straight up thin lights, ultrabooks, two-in-ones. I think these are going to be very, and I mean, we already talked about it, right? They are supposed to be slightly faster than Apple's M2 processor. Like, if you know what the M2 processor and how people rave about it, like, I don't know what else you really need at this point. Then you throw in an NPU to handle all this other cool stuff. These are going to be really fast systems. I think Qualcomm will have the edge up overall here for Intel. But Intel is needed because hospitals, enterprise, schools, first responders, all these companies and institutions that rely on x86 programs and efficiency and existing hardware and all this are going to stick around for a while. So
Yeah.
cool. Anything else you want to add, or we should talk about for the Intel stuff?
I don't think so. I think that's everything. I think we should say we're probably expecting the first Intel PCs of this caliber to sort of start showing up early next year, I guess. Probably before the Qualcomm
I
stuff,
think
right?
a couple, I think, are even available right now. But yeah, I heard February.
Yeah.
Some mid-February, some will definitely be shipping by then. You might see a couple even in January, but yeah, these are kind of ready to go. That's the
Hmm.
difference between Intel and Qualcomm.
Yeah, yeah.
Intel is like, here's our new chips, but they've been making them for the last 6 months. So when I
Right.
went to Malaysia, I actually saw these things being made. So they've been, stacking them up already. Qualcomm, I don't know if they've even reached production phase yet. So
Yeah.
but there we go. Stick a pin in that. CES, we'll be in Vegas. We'll have all those announcements there. That's January, technically the 9th through the 12th, I think it is. So pay attention there. You're going to see a lot of cool laptops coming out with all this kind of technology in there. I could tell you everything that's going to be kind of announced at CES in terms of laptop is Intel. So it's Intel driven. You're not going to see Qualcomm. I doubt you're going to see Qualcomm stuff announced
No.
yet. I think it's still too early. And AMD did announce their new Ryzen processors, but they're I don't know. I saw some benchmarks that showed them actually slower than the previous generation, yet they're being claimed as being more efficient. I'm like, we're going to do this again. I could be wrong on that.
We're
Obviously,
slowly becoming an AMD haters podcast.
well, it's only because we focus a lot on laptops,
Yeah.
right? And that's because that's my jam. I don't Desktops are fun, but desktops are very open-ended. You can like do all sorts of craziness, including like, obviously water cooling and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and I think AMD does often have an advantage there. Not all the time, but they compete better. In laptop, though, I will say, though, I've been using the HP Dragonfly Pro, which I reviewed early this year. That's powered by an AMD processor. It's a weird kind of laptop, although Paul Thurrott likes using it. I know he has a white one, though, which I was jelly of. Um, the speakers aren't great. They're kind of all right, but it does get good battery life. It also weighs a lot. It weighs like a pound more than the Dragonfly, the one I tend to use more often. Um, but it's a cool laptop. Like I do kind of like it, and AMD does do well. But I can tell you right now, the industry right now is going hard on Intel, and everything you're going to see coming out is going to be Intel, Intel, Intel. It's still that. So until that changes, and it's just because OEMs they get the co-engineered stuff with Intel. They get the Evo thing. They get advertising. I still see Dell Intel commercials on TV, and AMD's just not there, and their chips are just not better, like in any significantly measurable way. And now this NPU stuff, they're kind of a distant third, I would say, when it comes to the AI and NPU stuff. They will have it. They just won't be as leading. But there we go. All right, let's go into 2023 recap. Speaking of, pretty big year.
Yeah.
A lot of it, though, I would say was, talk about the future. But Zach, you have a lot to talk about when it comes to Windows and Microsoft, of course. So
Oh
why don't
yeah,
you
yeah.
walk us through
Well,
that?
real quick though, before we do the recap, I just want to quickly read this sponsor spot just to get it done and dusted. So
Sure.
Indeed is once again sponsoring this episode of the podcast. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey, at least. So, leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So, the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. So, listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/WPC. WCP. Just go to Indeed.com/WCP right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on this podcast. Indeed.com/WCP. Terms and conditions do apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. And with that, back to the show. And Indeed, we're going to now talk about a recap of the year and looking ahead to what we're expecting for 2024. We'll start with the 2023 stuff, though. This year was curious. It started off quite quiet. I think, unfortunately, it started off with Microsoft announcing 10,000 layoffs at the company, which was a rough start to the year, kind of a downer, I think. But shortly after that announcement, Microsoft came out with Bing Chat, which began this whole sort of snowball effect of just Microsoft becoming obsessed with AI and shoving it in front of every product and service they make. So it started in February with Bing Chat, if you remember, Dan. A few press were sort of flown out to Seattle. They sent out invites, but were very vague as to what they were going to be announcing. In fact, they sort of kept it a surprise. They were like, hey, you don't want to miss this. Please show up. We're inviting you. We're not going to tell you what we're announcing ahead of time. You've got to be here to see it happen in action. Sadly, the event wasn't streamed, but people, press, Dan was there. They got to view the unveilings live, and Microsoft basically unveiled AI for Bing. And that was the big announcement for February. And at the time, of course, it wasn't known as Copilot, although they did call it your Copilot for the web or something like that, didn't they? Your Copilot for search. So the Copilot sort of terminology was there lingering, but it wasn't at the forefront yet. At the time, for some reason, they had chosen to magnify the Bing brand for this, which I think was a big mistake, and I think Microsoft now thinks was also a big mistake. But at the time, they, for some reason...
It's worth a shot.
No. I think they should have called it Cortana, and personally. Anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, they tried to sort of make it a moment for Bing, and I think it was their attempt at clawing some market from Google. And I think even Satya Nadella at the time even said, like even if we would gain a single percentage of market share, that's $1 billion additional dollars or something like that, right? He said something. It doesn't matter how much we grow, even if it's a small number. That's a success story for Microsoft internally. I don't think they actually gained any market share ultimately. I think there was a little bit of hype for a few weeks. Then it died down and people went back to using Google, which is a shame. But then that AI and Bing sort of, as I mentioned, began a snowball effect where, Bill came along March 2023, Microsoft unveiled Copilot for Office. That's where the Copilot branding first began being used properly, was in Office. And they announced that, there'd be a Copilot coming to Word, PowerPoint, OneNote, Excel. Basically, every app under the Microsoft 365 umbrella would be getting its own AI assistant. At the time, that was very much a conceptual thing, though, because there was no working code, to my knowledge, announced during that event, unlike the Bing Chat stuff, which was available in preview the same day. Over the year, Microsoft has started rolling out Copilot in Office 365 to a limited set of enterprise customers, with plans to roll it out more broadly for consumers in 2024. But then Bill came along in May, I think it was 2023, where they announced the Windows Copilot. And this was sort of where the Copilot stuff really started picking up in regards to end user usage. So they were going to be adding Copilot to the taskbar and stuff. And it was announced as the Windows Copilot. And they also announced Copilot for basically every Microsoft service, whether it be an Azure thing or everything under the Microsoft umbrella has a Copilot of some kind now. GitHub, Visual Studio Code, probably. It's all there. But then the branding around this has changed here and there every so often. It's now the Microsoft Copilot for Windows or for product. No longer is it product Copilot. That's the branding they've chosen to go with. They're not always consistent themselves, but most of the time they are going Microsoft Copilot for Windows or Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365, etc., etc. So that's the sort of a very, very brief rundown of the AI stuff this year. Obviously, there was the partnership with OpenAI, which sort of powered all of this. There was the OpenAI drama that occurred not just a few weeks ago, with Sam Altman being let go from OpenAI and sort of being rehired back, and Microsoft quite willing to hire Sam Altman and anybody who was willing to jump from OpenAI to Microsoft. That never ended up happening. Sam Altman did sort of return to OpenAI, and Microsoft has continued its partnership at OpenAI, but with a non-voting seat at the board, which I don't really know what that means. I think it just means they get to watch what happens, but they don't get to say.
Yeah,
pretty much what that means.
I get they get to participate. They can jump in the
Suggest
debates.
things,
They can argue and stuff like that, but they don't get an actual say when it comes to voting.
Right.
So yeah,
So that makes sense. I think Satya Nadalla's happy with that, at least for now. Who knows? Maybe they'll be acquired in the future, but that didn't happen in 2023. Also, this year there was the unless Dan, you have any thoughts on the AI stuff the last year? Any?
no, it's just been a precursor to what's coming, obviously. But yeah, there's. I will say there was the hype, around the ChatGPT stuff. I think it peaked, and there's ebbs and flows, and it's dropped down a bit.
Yeah.
I think some people have found a routine to use it regularly for things and even make money off of it. I talked about this a few times on the podcast, how I regularly use Copilot in everyday things, mostly just for researching and asking questions. We were talking about this too. Like, you were looking for a word the other day. Like, I've done that myself. And sometimes I've been like, what's a snappier or snazzier word than this one, and or a rarer use of this word. Like, I ask it for those kind of questions sometimes, and it's been so good at just, like, I don't know, helping me out in all these little tasks. It's I don't know. I find it just incredibly useful, but others don't, right? So, but I think that some of that will change. So
yeah. So also this year, Xbox was in the news quite a bit. Obviously, Microsoft versus the FTC in regards to Xbox and trying to acquire Activision Blizzard. That was a huge topic throughout much of the year. It finally ended with the FTC, I think, losing their battle, and the deal for Activision Blizzard going through. I think it's gone through by now, or at the very least it's being accepted amongst all the major governing bodies. But yeah, the Xbox versus FTC stuff did reveal a lot of information that we otherwise wouldn't know about. Things like the next Xbox. One of the biggest leaks coming out of the FTC drama was that there was a bunch of documents that was submitted to the FTC that weren't correctly redacted, and those documents revealed not just the next Xbox, but plans for the next generation of Xbox consoles coming in 2027 or 2028, I think it was, where they were, it revealed things like how they're considering an AMD chip or possibly even an ARM chip for the next generation of Xbox consoles. It also revealed a potential design for the next Xbox Series X, like Xbox Series X Pro, perhaps, I don't know, which would be like an update to the current gen version of the Xbox, which in the design on the PowerPoint slide, it was this cylinder-looking thing versus a box, which, the name doesn't matter anymore, I guess. Plus, there was a new controller they're working on with more haptics and stuff, which looked pretty awesome. Lots and lots of leaks came out of that, and also the idea of this mobile store that Microsoft wants to build for Xbox. I'm still confused about this idea. So, are they just trying to build like a cloud-based store where you can buy games on there and just stream them to your phone? I guess that's what they're doing, but I would love to see them expand that into just being a storefront for mobile apps, and in addition to games, and maybe that could be Microsoft's back into mobile in the future. I don't know, but yeah, lots and lots of information came out through Xbox versus FTC. That was a very big topic for Microsoft throughout much of the year, and the FTC aren't done on Microsoft either. Apparently, is it the FTC? No, or it's the CMA? The CMA are now questioning Microsoft and OpenAI's relationship because of the recent stuff that went down. But we'll see where that goes in 2024. This year was also an interesting year for Surface, not in a good way, unfortunately. We had a very boring year for Surface, if I say so myself. We had, the Laptop Studio 2, which was a nice upgrade overall, but it wasn't groundbreaking in any way. Laptop Go 2, which was the most minor of a refresh you can possibly do. It's quite literally just a new chip on the inside. Same story really for the Surface Go 4. Surface Hub 3 was announced, but that's an enterprise product. Nobody really cares. That said, that did get some nice stuff. It can now rotate and stuff finally after all these years. But overall, the year for Surface was very boring, and it was a lot more dramatic internally with Panos Panay, obviously, upping and leaving Microsoft for a job at Amazon. That shook things up quite a bit, not just for Surface, but for Windows as well. But for Surface, I think we've already seen the worst of that shake up. Panos was already too busy with Windows to be dealing with Surface full time, even when he was at Microsoft this last year. And so I think that's what we've seen as a result this year was from Surface being almost Panosless anyway, right? We didn't really see much innovation from the Surface line. We didn't really see much from last year either from the Surface line. It's really been a boring couple of years for Surface. And obviously with Panos leaving, people were quite worried about, what does this mean for the future of Surface? Panos really was the only one on the leadership team batting for Surface's corner. What happens to Surface now? Microsoft officially says, Surface won't change. We will continue releasing new hardware here, there, whenever it's necessary. But we know that Microsoft has scaled back the Surface portfolio. Under Panos Panay, they were a lot more innovative. They were a lot more experimental. They would be happy to try new things like earbuds, headphones, dual screen phones, dials, whatever they may be. But with this new Surface, with its new leaders, without Panos, I think we're getting a much more conservative Surface lineup where the focus is primarily on the Windows PCs and the ones that sell the most, that being the Surface Pro, the Gos, and the laptops. We may get another Surface Studio at some point in the future, but it'll be few and far between. And obviously, we know the Surface Duo, which up until this year was alive. And early in 2023, they sort of decided to wind down that project. And now the Duo 3 is on the shelf. Maybe they'll return to it in the future. I don't know, but I'm not expecting a new Surface phone from Microsoft anytime soon, which is a crying shame. I think we can all agree. But then that also affects Panos' leaving, also affects Windows. Originally, the Hudson Valley release coming next year was going to be a much bigger update than I think it's going to be now. Obviously, the AI stuff is still the primary focus, and what was planned under Panos is still, to my knowledge, happening. But there was a much larger focus on things like the UI and maybe improvements for tablet users and stuff, which, to my knowledge, is unlikely to ship now. So the scope of Hudson Valley has certainly shrunk. Which also means that this is one of the reasons why I think they're going to call it Windows 11 versus Windows 12, which I think under Panos Panay would have almost certainly been a Windows 12, but since he's gone now, I think Windows 11 is much more likely. So that's
every time you say he's gone now, it sounds like
he died. Well, he might as well have.
He left. You should say now that he's left the company.
Now that Panos Panay has exited Microsoft's headquarters, he is not helping us anymore, and so Windows is going to burn. This is what I should be saying. But no. So that's my sort of brief, I guess, rundown of or recap of the 2023 year. Those are the things that stuck out to me the most. Am I missing anything, Dan? Was there anything that stood out to you in regards to OEM hardware and stuff? I guess you've reviewed quite a few things this year, or at least tried them out, like the HP Fold and the dual screen Lenovo laptop and stuff. Anything stood out to you this year in regards to hardware?
Yeah, I mean the Spectre Fold and I would guess Lenovo's dual screen laptop, not as good, but it was a great effort. Yeah. For me, and spoiler alert, we're doing our awards right now. For me, the HP Spectre Fold is the laptop of the year, and I know many people are going to laugh at that because it's a $5,000 laptop, and who's going to buy it? But my point for that is, one, it has the best innovation I've seen in any device out the gate. For such a radical new form factor. I found it incredibly useful. And I see it really as the future, not for all laptops, of course, but for a certain segment of people who need that flexibility in a device. Just like how there was a question about, do we need a 2-in-1, right? A lot of people, I don't need a 2-in-1. And it's not like 2-in-1s replaced all laptops. Clamshells even kind of came back too. But there is a group of people who just prefer 2-in-1. And I think, HP just did an outstanding job for what is a tricky thing to pull off. Granted, yeah, $5,000, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it's some of the best hardware I've ever used. It's one of the most satisfying devices I've used. And actually, yeah, I don't know. In terms of anything else, Lenovo did have that dual screen laptop. The other dual screen one, the one that's in the bottom half. It's like a little side screen kind of. Lenovo is always doing kind of fun, crazy stuff. The X13S, unfortunately, I believe that came out technically
That was
in
2022.
2022.
Yeah.
Yeah, so not much for
The
ARM.
Lenovo had that all-in-one that I reviewed, that 32-inch 4K all-in-one, which I loved. I think more OEMs should be doing all-in-ones, and for some reason they don't. So that was good to see.
It's mostly because they probably don't sell as
No,
much.
I
But
agree.
right now, actually speaking of HP again, we're reviewing the HP Move, which if you
Yeah.
don't know what that is, that kind of slipped out of nowhere. So that was announced with the Spectre Fold. That's a 24-inch, maybe 27-inch. Forgot the size of it. It's an all-one, but it's literally a display. It's a display with a computer built into it, into the back, and it's just so clever. It has little feet on it that um, have push pins. So when you carry, it has a handle, and you carry it around, and when you put it down on the table, the little pins go in, and then the feet swivel out. So you can literally lift up this thing with one hand and just take it with you, or you can place it down on the table with one hand. You don't need to, grab a kickstand or pull out the feet. It does it for you. It has a built-in battery that's supposed to get like 4.5 hours of battery life. Of course, you plug it in too because it's mostly a desktop, but you can use it, without plugged in. It has amazing speakers. It has basically a speaker bar with I think 8 speakers in it, at least four. Um, it has a really good webcam because HP always has really good webcams. Beautiful display. It has a little net in the back where you can put the wireless keyboard. So you just slap that in there and you just grab it. And it's meant for families who want like a computer that can just be, it can be in
Moved.
the kitchen, it can be in
Yeah.
the living room, it could be in your bedroom. You could just take it around with you wherever you want. And it's not even that expensive. I think it was $1,300 or something like that. And it's made with really cool recycled plastic, which is kind of cool too. But I think that's just crazy innovation. It's the first time I've seen Lenovo did do a portable all-in-one a couple years ago, but it was like this thing was 9 pounds, I think it is, and like Lenovo's was like 20 something. Like it was just, but that was many years ago. But this thing is like light and portable, so that's a cool thing, cool all-in-one. So we are still seeing some innovation there, but yeah. Um, the other cool thing is what I'm still using, this Dell display, 32-inch 6K with
Yeah. That's
the
nice.
best web camera I've ever used. This is an incredible display. Not for gamers, it's only 60 hertz, but in terms of everyday productivity use, the thing's awesome. Yeah, so
Brilliant. All right, and with that, I guess that leads us into what we're expecting for the next year ahead. So, obviously, we've talked already a bit about this AI wave of PCs. You are going to see that, and obviously, we're going to see that from Intel, and we're going to see it from Qualcomm as well. And for the first time, I think, ever, we're going to actually see more OEMs adopting Qualcomm chips than ever before. And those will begin being announced to start rolling out in June 2024, to my knowledge. It might be announced a bit earlier than that, but availability-wise, it should be from June onwards, and that will be shipping with the platform release for the next version of Windows without all the features. The Hudson Valley release with the features and the AI features and whatnot will be coming in September. But you'll be able to start buying hardware that's compatible with all the AI stuff ahead of that. So once it's all available and ready to go, you can just install an update and you get all the new AI stuff, which is pretty cool. But with more OEMs jumping on Qualcomm, because it's not just going to be, because the last couple of years we've seen Lenovo. It's mostly Lenovo. I think HP may have adopted it once or twice with ARM, but Dell, for example, hasn't really. They did it with the Inspiron 14, that one random mid-range laptop one time. But Dell have more or less been quite conservative when it comes to ARM. To my knowledge, that changes next year. They're going to be a lot more on board with it, as are ASUS
I
and
will say that was funny too with Qualcomm because when that list came up on the screen with all the OEMs supporting the new X Elite processor and Dell was on there, when I was
yeah.
talking to some of the PR people, they're like, "Oh wait, was Dell on there?" And I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "Interesting." They're
Oops.
like, "I guess they were on and off and on and off."
Yeah.
So they still, I don't know the reason behind that. They just wanted to kind of remain mysterious or they weren't 100% committed, but they were kind of waffling even at the
Yeah.
last minute with that
Well,
announcement.
I
So
know
there you
they're
go.
committed. I've heard things about what Dell's working on for next year, so I'm very excited to say that Dell is going to have an ARM laptop, at least one of them, which is pretty cool.
Good.
Um, on the subject of the Windows stuff, as we've already talked about most of this already, but just to give a brief recap of what we're expecting for 2024, AI, an advanced Copilot, which is able to enhance Windows search and work for you in the background to bring you files, a super resolution feature that can upscale video games and video using the NPU, a new live captions feature that can translate other languages into English in real time, or your language into other languages in real time as well, and a number of other things in regards to just quality of life improvements and stuff. The next release, to my knowledge, won't be Windows 12. I think it'll just be a Windows 11 AI update primarily, but that's still, Microsoft is viewing it as a big update for Windows. And with the new platform release, which comes with efficiency improvements and performance improvements and stuff as well, it will overall be a nice update. Next year, you will see an interesting trend that we haven't seen with Panasonic. You've already started to see it a little bit with how Microsoft is suddenly reinvesting in Windows 10, but Microsoft is essentially going to support all the versions of Windows in the market currently. So that's Windows 10, Windows 11 version 23H2, or Nickel, which is what Windows 11 is currently based on, and this upcoming release of Windows based on Germanium as well. So there'll be 3 versions of Windows in support at the same time. And as a result of that, to my knowledge, Microsoft will be backporting, I guess, certain features from Germanium to Nickel and back to Vibranium, which is what Windows 10 is based on. So for the first time in a long while, you will see one feature that ships across 3 different versions of Windows, because Microsoft wants to treat all 1.4 billion Windows users as a collective versus a billion of them on Windows 10, 400 million on Windows 11 Nickel, and then maybe 100 million on Windows 11 Germanium in the first 6 months. I don't know. But this is because the Windows user base is fragmented again, and Microsoft would like to get everybody off that, but there's nothing they can really do about it right now because of, I don't know why Microsoft doesn't change this. How Windows is, the rules are that they've made themselves. They cannot force a platform upgrade on users. It's optional up until the point the version of Windows you're using is out of support. Except for if you're using a different version of Windows, in which case you're never forced to update. So Windows 10 users will never be forced to update to Windows 11 even after the end of support date, whereas Windows 11 users on Nickel, if they choose not to upgrade to Windows 11 Germanium, they will be forced to at some point once Windows 11 Nickel runs out of support. So that's how they're going to sort of carry Windows 11 users forward, and that's the main reason why they don't want to give Germanium the Windows 12 branding, because if they do that, then Windows 11 users never have to update to it, whereas if they call it Windows 11, then at some point in the next 12 to 18 months, those Nickel users will be moved to Germanium. Whereas Windows 10 users, they're stuck on Windows 10. There's nothing they can do about that, at least currently. And so you're going to see some features backported to Nickel while it's in support, and also backported to Windows 10 while it's in support as well. And that's going to be a big mess for the Insider program. They're going to sort of rejiggle the channels again, to my knowledge, so that the Canary and Dev channels are testing the Germanium stuff. The beta channel will be testing Nickel and Windows 10, and then the release preview channel will be doing whatever the hell the release preview channel does. I have no idea these days. So that's all fun to look forward to and whatnot. I guess we'll start hearing about that in early 2024. Same goes for the next Windows 11 Moment update for 23H2. That is scheduled for February, and to my knowledge, it's not going to be a huge update. It's primarily just going to deliver all of the EEA changes that they're sort of being forced to do by the DMA. The Digital Markets Act, that is, which is the ability to change the search provider in the Windows search pane, and the ability to change the news provider in the widgets panel, as well as turn off the news feed if you don't want it there. There's a few other things coming, minor additions and adjustments coming with that as well, such as Microsoft respecting your browser choice and actually adhering to that choice, whereas right now in some versions of Windows in some markets, even if you set Chrome as your default browser, clicking on a link in the widgets panel or something will open Edge. That will be changing in the EEA, and that will be coming with Moment 5 in February. So that's that. In regards to hardware, and on the Surface side at least, I'm hearing at least 2 new Surface products next year, maybe 3. Those being the Surface Pro 10, of course, Surface Laptop 6, and perhaps Surface Laptop Go 4. Not too sure on what's coming with the Surface Laptop Go 4, but I do know the Surface Laptop 6 is expected to be a major update. For the first time in the history of the Surface laptop line. I'm expecting a new design, the ability to choose between Intel or ARM for the Surface laptop, which is going to be fantastic. Same, 13 and 15-inch screen sizes. There are slight changes here and there in regards to the actual display sizes themselves. I will have a write-up talking more in depth about what I'm hearing for the next Surface laptop and Surface Pro in the next coming weeks, probably around Christmas, just to have something to read over Christmas, I guess. But that's the Surface Laptop 6. I think it's got more ports as well, and the newer design, as I mentioned, which is going to be pretty fun. And then Pro 10 less of a major redesign, to my knowledge. It might have some slight rounded corners on the display, which would be nice, but it's still going to have like a thicker top and bottom bezel versus the sides. The biggest changes will be to the display. I'm hearing it will finally have an anti-reflective coating, which is something Dan has been asking for 1,000 years. They're finally doing it, Dan, so celebrate. But yeah, obviously Intel and ARM will be the case there as well. That's already the case on the Surface Pro 9, so that shouldn't be changing. But going forward, I think what you're going to see is an ARM option in all surfaces. Microsoft wants to normalize ARM as much as possible, and to be fair, they're the only OEM to really do it, right? Because they make Windows as well. If they're going to tell everybody that ARM is a normal part of Windows now, they have to offer ARM in all of their surfaces. And to my knowledge, the plan is to offer, wherever there's a Surface PC launching, as long as the price of that device allows for it, there will be an ARM option. And so that's what we're seeing with the Pro 10 and the Laptop 6. Like I said, I'm not too sure what's coming with the Laptop Go 4, but yeah, when I start hearing more about that, I'll be sure to let you know. So that's what I'm hearing for Surface. I think next year Surface, it will be a big year for Surface, especially because the Laptop 6 is supposed to be such a big update. But if you're hoping for like innovative new designs and form factors and stuff, I think Surface isn't the place to be looking for 2024. I think, like I said, this falls back to the whole being more conservative. They want to make products that people will buy, and they don't want to take as many risks anymore, which is, I think, a huge shame. That's kind of the point of Surface. But Surface's biggest customer are enterprises, and enterprises know what they want, and they don't want experimental weird form factors. They want a laptop and they want a tablet, and that's what we're going to see from Microsoft in 2024. That could change in 2025 onwards, where they might start going back to being a little bit more experimental, but for the next year at least, it's going to be all about AI and all about boring computers that people want to buy. So yeah, that's my expectations for 2024. I don't know, Dan, if you have any.
I mean, I'd be curious about, we're just talking about foldables and stuff like that. Sorry, laptops with foldable displays.
Yeah.
So people don't. I'd be curious if we should maybe see some more. I don't think we'll see a ton more, but we should see some more stuff kind of coming out, I imagine. So I think that'll be kind of fun to watch. Yeah, I think next year's just going to be about having cool and quiet, powerful laptops that last all day.
Yeah.
Along with all the AI stuff. That's going to really open the doors for more creative uses of software and helping us out on daily tasks. And you're going to combine that with Qualcomm doing that with phones that will be able to sort of mirror, that sort of kind of behavior. You also go see more interconnectedness between smartphones and Windows laptops. Again, all the OEMs, Intel too, with Unison. They did announce like some updates to Unison and for the ones that are coming, but Intel is kind of really pushing. By the way, Intel Unison being shipped on a laptop is also part of Evo. That's a requirement. You can just go download it yourself, but the idea it's like already there when you get that computer. That's why if you get an Evo laptop, you'll see you'll have like Phone Link and it'll have Intel Unison on board already. But I think you're going to continue seeing more of that as, because smartphones, it's funny, smartphones are still obviously extremely useful, but their limitations have been kind of reached in terms of how much work you can do on them. So now they're kind of becoming auxiliary devices for a laptop. And I think you're going to continue to see Microsoft and its partners kind of go down that route and try to optimize, the ease of sharing. I still find sometimes sharing pictures between devices, obviously Phone Link helps there, but can be kind of a pain. So I think you'll continue seeing more stuff with that. The other thing I can tell you about, displays are getting way better for laptops. I think the big thing you're going to see much more of are not only OLED displays, but OLED displays now that can do 120 hertz variable refresh. And I think the variable refresh rate is going to be big too. I think you'll see displays that can finally drop below 60 hertz. In other words, when you're reading a static, web page, they already do this on iPhones, right? The iPhone display can drop down to, I don't know, it's like 1 or 2 hertz when it's, and it does it super rapidly, but every time it does that, it's saving battery life. And the same applies for a laptop, but it has to do with scalability and size. I think I don't think the laptop ones will go down to 1 or 2 hertz, but they'll drop down to, I don't know, maybe 40 hertz or something like that. again, helping save battery life there. But now you also see 120 hertz becoming more standard in productivity laptops. This is something I know Zach's a big fan of. Previously, we obviously saw high refresh rates in displays for gaming laptops. Occasionally, you would see them kind of come into the productivity thing. Surface Laptop Studio 1 and 2, for instance, does have this, but it only goes to 90 hertz. 90 hertz is fine. Don't get me wrong. I'll take 90 over 60. I don't notice it nearly as much, though. Like, I could use a 90 hertz laptop, and if you just told me it was 60 hertz, I probably would have, thought it was.
Yeah, I will say
120 hertz.
I think that's primarily because Windows isn't very good at being
True.
high refresh rate. It's just like there's not much
Yeah.
in regards to animations and stuff for you to really appreciate it, other than scrolling and stuff and like moving windows around. That's the only time you really notice it.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, I wonder if they can do more around that, or what's causing the issue. Because when you do go to 120 hertz, it does feel better. When you minimize and expand a
Yeah.
window, it does
Right.
look way better. 90 hertz, though, I start questioning, I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not
90
worth
hertz
it.
doesn't do much for
Not
me.
worth it, yeah.
But whatever. But yeah, so I think you'll see a lot of technology around the displays. Mini LED is still kind of gaining ground. Mini LEDs operate on a different type of technology. I can tell you that reminds me, we did get an offer for some desktop displays that are really amazing. But you're going to see some really big improvements when it comes to desktop displays too. I'm talking more for gaming kind of stuff. Basically reaching the best of both worlds between resolution, the type, whether OLED, and of course speeds. I think it'll be a bigger thing. But I think that's kind of about it. I don't
Yeah.
think 5G is going to be a big deal, 2024, not
It
any
wasn't
more
in
than it was in
2023 or 2022 or 2021.
Yeah, exactly. And that, makes me mad and upset. But then again, I'm using the Dragonfly G4. That's kind of all I need anyway. I would prefer if the Spectre Fold had 5G, but that's kind of pushing it. But yeah, long as it's still available for some devices, it's fine. But yeah, I don't think it's good. The problem is in the United States, it's still too expensive and cumbersome just to get cheap 5G easily without, a lot of times you got to get a contract for a year, or it's like $30 per month. And if it's something you only want to use occasionally,
Yeah.
it just sucks. Because it's like when I went to like Israel and Malaysia, it was like, here's 3 gigs of data, $7. Like, okay, imagine if you had like 3 gigs of 5G data for $7 a month and you had a 5G laptop. Like, and I think then, now you're talking a Disney Plus subscription, right? So then I think it's like a much more doable thing. But when it's like, oh, now you got to contact your carrier. Like, remember my issue when I had Sprint, and then Sprint got acquired by T-Mobile, and I had my 4G plan on Sprint, and then yeah, and then I think it was even 5G too. And then T-Mobile took it over, but they couldn't migrate my Sprint account to their 5G system. And so then I like wanted, and they wouldn't sell me like it was a nightmare. Like, they kind of ruined the whole thing. So, then I dropped them for that. So I think that'll be still a problem, unfortunately, until those carriers learn to fix that stuff. But I don't know anything. I guess gaming, we talked a lot about handheld gaming. I think that's going to continue to grow.
Yeah.
I think you'll still see some more devices. Dell, again, they showed off a handheld like 3 years ago. It was Intel powered. I don't know what's happened with that. They have to still be thinking about it now. Now Lenovo has one out there. Is HP going to do something under their Legion? Is it Legion? No, sorry. Omen brand. Omen Go. Yeah, I would hope so. Like, I don't see why HP wouldn't get into this. The question, of course, is how do they bring something different to the table? Lenovo did, surprisingly, from the Asus ROG Ally. But where do you go from there? Do you make a smaller device? Do you make a more affordable device? Do you make one that's even more expensive and higher end? You know, I don't know. There's going to be some kind of cool options there. Oh, the other thing you'll see for 2024 are 3D displays. These aren't the displays from years ago where you had to put glasses on and it was like a reticular type thing. These are straight up normal looking displays that have sophisticated cameras on them in the front, obviously, that measure your face and depth and your eyes and all this kind of stuff, and then make the display you're looking at in 3D at such. They're really cool. It's a really weird experience because it's just like I said, you're not putting glasses on. You have to like kind of sit in front of straight the monitor, and if someone else is looking at you, they won't see it in 3D. They'll just see, I think, 2D. But these are going to be, in fact, Lenovo just announced one. This technology is primarily controlled by one company now, by the way. So all these companies need to go through that company to make this technology. You're going to start to see more of that. It's already announced at CES last year. I think Acer had a laptop, a gaming laptop that had it. The issue has been production and getting it out there. But you're going to start to see more of this stuff become available. And I think it's going to be a big deal. Again, if you're a regular consumer, it probably won't be. It'll be cool as hell, but you're not going to like necessarily go buy one just because you want to see Excel in 3D. But for creative people who are working as engineers, um, designing stuff, and modeling things, even for video gaming, that's where I think Acer was kind of aiming it. You will see this technology, and I think it's going to be cool because obviously Apple's releasing its Vision Pro headset, and that is one way to get into an immersive 3D world where you can kind of manipulate stuff. I would argue that this route of going down with these monitors is going to be the more mainstream way. Because think about it, the problem with the Vision Pro is you still got to put what, a pound and a half headset on you. And no matter how you justify that, it's not going to be comfortable after 30 minutes, 2 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. Like, plus your battery's going to run out. You're going to need to recharge it. Your nose is going to get marks on it from wearing it too long. It's just going to be not a great experience. It'll be really amazing for 30 minutes that you'll be able to tolerate it, at least for now. Meanwhile, if you have a 3D monitor, like, you'll be able to just stare at it all day and anyone can use it. They don't need to log in. They're not going to need a special account. They're not going to need to load up their software. This will just be a normal display that just behaves normally. And then when certain apps are available that take advantage of it, it goes 3D, you'll be able to do that. I think this is going to be a much bigger deal than wearing like a VR helmet. You know, at least until that technology can be shrunk down to the size of normal glasses. And you're talking, I think, at least 5 years, maybe 10 years before that happens. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that's that in regards to expectations for 2024. It will hopefully be an interesting year. I think the AI PC stuff is really going to be sort of the main thing for us next year. But yeah.
Someone saying about the 3D stuff, like a Nintendo 3DS. Not really. That's very, 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 very old technology.
Yeah.
This, like I said, uses cameras on it to measure your face, your depth, your distance, your eyes, and then it calculates and makes the 3D happen in real time. It's a radically different, much more immersive, realistic system.
Yeah, because what it can do is it can track you, so you can move around it like that,
Yes.
and it actually makes sense. Whereas on the old DSs, it was like if you have to look at it this one space. If you don't look at it that way, then it doesn't look good. It doesn't look right. And also the Nintendo DS method used to give me an eye ache. It just made my eyes hurt. Whereas the 3D...
Yeah, because it didn't maintain the resolution, right? It had like a reticular kind of effect to it. Yeah, sorry. The display is called Lenovo's ThinkVision 3D monitor.
Yeah.
Can render.
I tried that at IFA, and what I said to them, because the picture, so the picture is like a 1080p 3D thing because obviously it requires so many pixels. It's basically double that to make it work with both eyes. But it's clear enough, like it genuinely it's not a problem. And it was so good that I wanted to reach out and manipulate it with my hands, but you can't. At least right now with the version 1 that they've got, is it doesn't do hand tracking, it only does face tracking. So you can look around the image and stuff, but you can't reach out and touch it, even though your brain will be like, oh yeah, you can reach out and touch that. You can't do that yet.
Yeah, because if they add more cameras with hand tracking and
Just
processing to do that,
Yeah.
yeah, it'll drive up the cost. But there's no technological reason that they can't pull that off.
Yeah,
and I think that will probably be the next level. But they're going to start with here. What's the pricing on that monitor? I don't even know if it's
I think it's $3,000. I think, if I remember, I could be wrong.
Yes, $3,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, stupid expensive. But as it becomes mass produced and more people use it, it'll come down in price. It'll become normal. Like they're already putting it into laptops. Like I said, there were originally two companies that made these. and one made ones for smaller devices like tablets and laptops, and then another one made the ones for like desktops. And one company bought the other, so now they control all of it basically.
Right.
But yeah, it's oh yeah, so 3D resolution does drop down. It drops down to 1920 by 2160 versus basically 4K for 2D.
Right.
But it's a switchable lenticular lens with eye tracking. So technically it is a lenticular, but yeah, it's a different system. You said you tried it, and
Yeah.
it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be a bigger deal. And that technology will just only improve over the years too. But I think it's going to be much more, if you work as an engineer, I feel like, I'm not saying the Vision Pro or those kind of devices will be useless. I think they'll be good. There'll be instances where you'd want that whole immersive experience and using your hands to manipulate. I think, but 90% of the work you're going to do day to day, you're going to want something like this kind of display. I think it's just going to be much easier. So, because there's no way you can wear that thing for like 8 hours. Are you kidding me?
It's heavy as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a pound and a half. Yeah, it'll get lighter. The battery life will get better, but still, no one's going to want to wear something like that on their head for that long. I can tell you that. Like, it's just not. Anyway, I think that'll wrap it up for the podcast. Unless you got anything to add, we could do. Unless you have a thing of the week you want to talk about, Zach.
I don't have a thing of the week. I've been trying to think the whole podcast, but I haven't watched a single thing this week. So sadly, nope.
Yeah, same here. The only funny thing was I had jury duty, and then I shared some screenshots. I had to fill out my jury duty form, and so they asked like, "Have you been arrested? Have you been sued?" And I got to answer yes to all that. It's true. I was arrested in college.
Nice.
It's not on my record anymore. It was expunged because it was stupid. It was a college prank that went wrong because the guy was just he was so uptight. I think I've told this story before. It was an email bomb. We sent over it was me and someone else. We sent over 1,000 emails at once to this guy's account. He was our resident director who ran the dorm, and he sucked. So we let him know. But we used anonymous accounts. But this was back many years ago, and it was so much data, it almost crashed the entire network at Siena College where I went to. But we didn't think anything of it at the time.
That's
it was just like a
such
prank.
a nerdy reason to get arrested.
Totally. It was hilarious. It made the front page of the Albany Times because it was like the first like cyber crimes in the area, you know? Like that wasn't a thing back then. That's how old I am.
Yeah.
And then yeah, the cops came to my room. No, they didn't come to my room. It was Siena security came to my room, and they just like they would just want to talk. I was a good kid. Like I didn't do anything else. I wasn't a drunk. I wasn't getting into fights. I didn't, do terrible things at college. So I was like, oh, I got nothing to worry about. My earpiece just died. So I had nothing to worry about. And then I got led to this room, and I had to, it was two detectives, and they walked me through everything. And then, yeah, so they had to arrest me. They didn't want to. They told me that. And then they even joked around. They're like, should we put cuffs on them? They're like, I don't know. Is there a keyboard around? So it was hilarious. Although I was in a police car going to a police station to get booked. I didn't have to post bail. So that was fun. And then, yeah, and then the case got dismissed eventually. It was what's called an ACOD, which means if I didn't get arrested for 6 months, it'd be cleaned off my record, which wasn't hard for me at the time. And the story got even funnier because on that day I was gone for hours, and then I came back, and there was this girl who I was trying to date at the time. Never happened. Get close. I was hanging out with her in her room, and we were watching the news, and then I came up on the news.
Oh, nice. That's great.
Yeah. I'm like, by the way, so this is what happened today. So that was funny. And then when I had to go to court, it was called All Saints Day. So it was this holiday that my college was religious, believe it or not. But they were cool. They were like the monks, so they wore like Jedi robes. That's how we viewed them. But it was a big party on campus, which just basically means everybody got drunk and stuff like that. So I went to court after a couple beers. Let's just say. But it's not like I was defending myself. I didn't have to get up and argue.
All right.
But it was hilarious. The judge read out the email I wrote, which was full of some profanities, and he was like, "Nice language." I'm like, "Oh, fuck yourselves." Sorry, people. Like, come on, man. I'm 18. Get out of here. Anyways, so yeah, that's my story being arrested. So I got to put that on my juror form because you have to be honest, and I didn't really want to do jury duty, of course. Um, and then also they were like, "Is there any other reason you shouldn't serve on jury duty?" And I just put anarchist, which is technically true. Like I've been calling myself an anarchist and does like in high school. In fact, my college nickname was Danarchy, which is still
Nice.
hilarious
That's
to me.
great.
Um, but I didn't get picked for jury, but no one did. They dismissed everybody.
That's
So
what
I
they
think
told
they had
you.
no, it was just like there was like 30 of us in the room, and they are just like, all
Yeah.
right, you can all go home. They must have done a plea deal or something like that. It was actually kind of a cool experience, though. I would have served on the jury, no problem. I thought it would have been kind of fun, but I had to be honest.
Yeah, no.
And
Yeah.
then when I left the courthouse, I saw probably the second most stereotypical thing you could imagine with a cop. The first would be if I walked out and a cop was eating a donut.
Sure.
The second is being in America, I walked out to cops basically harassing black people.
Oh,
I was
good.
just like, are you kidding me? Like
Yeah.
right on the sidewalk in front of the courthouse, they were giving these kids who are waiting for Uber and like the cops were like basically harassing them. I was just like, if that was a white person, they would not be doing that. I was just like, come on, man. Like I wanted to tell the cop, like, can I just put a donut in your hand and just capture the most stereotype of like what a police officer is in this country? Anyway, so that was frustrating, and that's why I'm an anarchist. Anyways, so that's my
Yeah.
thing of the week. But if you do get a jury duty summons, I encourage you to do your duty as an American citizen. I'm not kidding. It's a kind of a cool thing to do. Not many countries have such a system. I also learned that Massachusetts has I think, the world's oldest inactive constitution, which I didn't know
Oh,
about. So
there you are.
that was kind of cool. Yeah. So that's my thing of the week. Sorry about the swear. Anyway, we'll do some Q&A with the audience now. If you have any questions, you can file them into the chat. Otherwise, we're going to pop off here. You can follow me on Twitter, Daniel_Rubino, Rubino, on Twitter or on Threads. You can follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN, also on Twitter at Threads. Unless anything major happens, we won't be doing another podcast until sometime in 2003. Like I said, we'll have a post CES
2003.
2024. Sorry. All right. I've already been. Yo, that sounds weird, right? 2024.
Yeah, I know.
Where's my flying car? But we'll do the post CES podcast, of course. That'll probably be the first one we'll be doing. So that'll be on a Friday or a Thursday. All right, we could do it Thursday, actually. So, but yeah, other than that, thanks for listening and have a happy new year, everyone. And we hope it all goes well for everybody and gets to your family. Take care, everyone.
Brilliant. So yes, if you have any questions, now's the time to put them in the chat. There's already one in there. Do you think Panos was pushed out? I don't think he was pushed out. I think
No.
if Microsoft wanted to fire him, they could have quite easily done that. There's no reason to push him out. I think he left on his own accord because he didn't like the direction of certain things. Primarily, I don't know if he was a huge fan of the massive AI focus that they suddenly had on everything. And I don't know if he was a fan of the scaling back of Surface, which was, to my knowledge, a decision made by the higher-ups. He didn't want that. He wanted to keep spending money and making fun products.
Any money. Yeah, no, I think you're right, though. I think he had principles
Yeah.
and, things he wanted to do. And I think when Microsoft, drew a line, and he's like, all right, that's enough. This is what I signed up to do, was this stuff I was working on. And now you're telling me I can't do it.
Yeah.
Or do it the way I want, and so I'm going to leave. And I don't blame him for that. It's a job. He's got to be happy at what he does, yeah. But yeah, I think that's also why as you're alluding to, we won't see exciting Surfaces next year.
Yeah. Are you guys sad to see E3 go? Or are you glad that E3 is officially dead, given that it had been on live support for years after it had been hit by COVID-19? It is sad, but I mean, we still have E3, but just not in one place at a convention center anymore. It's, all the big developers and Microsoft and stuff, even Sony, I think they do their own showcases now around June time, which is when E3 used to be. So I don't know if it's a huge loss that we no longer we have an E3 conference center, but I never went to E3. I know Dan, I think, went to E3 once or twice.
Yeah, yeah, a
Um,
couple times.
I'm sure it's fun if you're there in person, but as somebody who never went, I'm not too sad it's gone.
Yeah, I think I've been there, I want to say 3 times. Um, it's fun. It was I mean, it should be surprising. But it was the most fun event of all the ones I go to, like
Yeah,
CES, Mobile
yeah.
World Congress, IFA, all that. I mean, for obvious reasons. It's a giant,
Party.
you know, yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't want to say warehouse, but it's like giant convention center that's huge, and you walk inside and it's just video games, Sony, Sega, Nintendo, and it was just like, and I remember Sony would be right next to Microsoft, like like
Yeah.
literally right next to each other, and they would have these like huge setups, and you can go try out, you can wait in line and try all the games that were announced and all these new experiences. People were dressed up in costumes and cosplaying, which not my thing, but I respect people who do it. I think it's kind of fun. It was just such a fun atmosphere. And it was just cool because everybody there was like into the same thing and just excited for everything that was coming out and being announced. So that loss, I think, is unfortunate. I'm kind of sad to see it go. You know, the Summer Game Fest and how everything's split off now, I think it makes strategic sense because the problem was these companies had such big announcements that um, but it was too many stacked so that, like Microsoft would be peaking for a couple hours in the news, and then like Sony would come out and do their presser, and then Sony would take
Yeah, yeah.
over, and then Bethesda would come out and do their thing. And so it was hard to stay in the news cycle. And then, like, I think Sony was one of the first ones to pull out. They're like, we're just going to do our own thing because we control everything about it. uh, and then Microsoft followed, and everyone else started to too. And like I said, it makes strategic sense. It's just not nearly as fun. I think now it feels a little bit more like Sony versus Microsoft and like all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a shame. And plus, you feel bad for all the people that put it together. There was all the jobs created for it. It's like it kind of stinks.
Do you know if Microsoft considers Starfield to have been a commercial success for them? Press coverage on this has been weird. A lot of irrational hate makes it hard to know if it has been a success or not. I think it has been. I mean, it is a Bethesda
Yeah.
game. I mean, by that that alone, I think it has its own fan base already because it's a Bethesda game. I can't imagine it did any worse than Fallout 4 or Fallout 76. Well, I mean, Fallout 76 didn't do very well at all.
Right.
But the thing with
I think
Starfield wasn't particularly offensive. It was just Fallout 4 in space. And if you like Bethesda games, then there's no reason to dislike Starfield.
yeah.
That's, I think, what it comes
Yeah,
down to.
I think it's a slow burn too.
Yeah.
They have so much plans for Starfield. They've already announced some. Like I saw some article recently talking about there's going to be like a whole new way to transport yourself
Yeah.
and move around, and Starfield coming out. Like they clearly have a lot of plans to build it out. Um, I think it's gotten better and better with patches and all this kind of stuff. I think it's also could turn into valuable IP. Like there's no reason why they couldn't turn Starfield into a TV show on Netflix, just like uh, Fallout on, was it Amazon that's coming out? You saw the trailer for that, right? The Fallout show.
Yeah, I saw the trailer, yeah.
Yeah, that looks amazing. So like, I think they could do something like that, but I think Starfield, like I said, is going to be a slow burn that's just going to get better and better. Don't forget, No Man's Sky had way worse reviews when that came out, right? That was totally trash. People are getting refunds. Now look at No Man's Sky, right? So that actually did make a comeback. Cyberpunk 2077, same thing, got panned. Now it's considered to be one of the best games out there. So amazingly, you could launch a big title game that either gets terrible reviews or even just mediocre reviews, and still months or even a year later build out to be something bigger and better. So I think we'll give it time, but it is Bethesda. I think they have the ability to pull that off. Meteor Lake initial reviews sound underwhelming in the CPU department. Even efficiency looks an unknown due to the wide variation in single SKU power range. Yeah, it's like I said, it's going to be really hard to determine. There will be some sort of like one-to-one comparisons. Like we'll be able to compare this year's laptop to last year's laptop and kind of battery life. But it's also hard to balance if you're getting more performance out of the new one and all that. My hunch is efficiency is going to be better. I don't, but to set expectations like we were talking about before, it's not going to be ARM level. I just think it'll be. But then you also get into that, are you getting 8 hours of real world usage from like a 2K display? That's for a lot of people really, really good still. And for most people will be okay. And I think, I was talking about Evo, it's 10 hours for full HD. Like, I think if you got that, I think most people would be like, that's all day battery life, and they would have no complaints. Then it just gets into like a weird, like, pissing contest. Like, well, I got 14 hours. I got, a MacBook One got 22 hours on streaming video. It's like, okay, but like, as I mentioned, like, you're never going to come home from work or from school with 40% battery life and be like, I'll be all right for tomorrow, and not charge it. So then it's like, what are you going to do with that extra 40%? And it's very rare, I think, that most normal people are like, I need to be on my laptop for 10 hours today away from a power source. That's a pretty rare thing. So, but I think they'll be good. I don't think they're going to be as amazing as people want them to be. So, yeah. Oh, has there been any concrete developments as far as domestic chip manufacturing? We actually had a story up this week about that. So part of the CHIPS Act. So, I mean, here, Intel is building a new fab. I believe it's in Oregon. Uh, and so that's going to help do that. They're also going to be taking on making chips for other companies so they don't have to be as reliant on TSMC uh, for that. I think there's other stuff that's going on with the CHIPS Act. The problem was with the CHIPS Act, it's $54 billion or something like that, taxpayer money used to kickstart this. But the story came out this week, only 35 million has been dispersed so far, which is very, very little. So yeah, it's an important thing to move over to domestic manufacturing of processors because everybody's fearful that China could invade Taiwan and then knock out TSMC, take it for themselves, and no more iPhones all of a sudden, yeah, so it could be a big deal. I don't know, bureaucracy, man. I'm one of these people who would love to have big government plans and do stuff like we used to do, like with the Hoover Dam and making the highway system. But today's system is just so bureaucratic, and it feels like we can't get anything done, which is really frustrating. Yeah, games are still being announced. Who cares what the official gathering is called? No, I think it matters because like E3 was a centralized event that took place for a couple of days. Now it's spread out all over the place, and it's a different feel. It was more like and granted, E3 eventually opened it up to the public, right? That's how bad things were kind of getting, but it was just like a festival for gaming, and everybody was there, all the major companies. It was just kind of cool to have it all in one place. It was like it was as much a celebration as it was announcements. You don't get that same feeling anymore from these events. They're still cool, but E3 was kind of special.
Can you send me your audio file, Dan, real quick?
Oh yeah.
Thanks. Right, last call for questions. If there are no more questions, then we are going to head off. I think in the new year we're thinking about doing the podcast at a different schedule, aren't we? So currently, I think we're thinking Thursdays, and even then, will we do one every week? I think it will depend on if there's stuff to talk about. There might, because there's not always stuff to talk about. So yeah, we'll keep you updated on that.
Doggies have unionized and are demanding walks. They both come in like a tag team. They're like, let's go.
They've been planning it.
Oh, they totally did.
Yeah. It looks like there are no more questions. So with that, we will head off. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in this year. We appreciate your time listening to us ramble on about tech topics. Yes, like I said, we'll be back in the new year. I don't know if we have an exact date yet for when we'll be back, but obviously follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated on when we will be returning for the first show of 2024. It'll probably be the 11th, I imagine. But the 11th.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll keep you updated. Thank you for tuning in, and we shall see you next year. Bye-bye.